Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. Our next guest believes that there's always a story behind the numbers when it comes to due diligence. We're going to unpack what that means. But first, please welcome Kevin Hill, host of Put That Coffee Down, and something really cool that we're going to unpack a little bit later on. Kevin, welcome to the Hot Seat.
Thanks, Spencer. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, before we heat things up a little bit, why don't you just take 30 seconds and just tell us about what you're working on right now?
Yeah, so right now I'm the host of Put That Coffee Down, the freight sales show for closers in the freight sales industry, and also doing a little bit of sales research. And that can be from leads to kind of like my pet project right now is something I'm calling shipper profiles. It's part of HK Analytica, a company that I formed, a partnership that I formed in the last few months. And it's really about due diligence, taking that qualitative financial due diligence and applying that to the sales, trying to unpack why companies make the decisions that they do, who are the decision makers, the internal politics and dynamics that a lot of sales get hung up and delayed or killed, trying to be able to really see that chessboard before you get in on discovery calls and get too deep into the process. Gives you a game plan or a playbook. I can use many sports analogies for it, but that's what I'm working
We
on.
will welcome them all. Let's just
Yes.
Well, listen,
yeah,
I'm excited. I'm excited about that. That's I think that's going to be very timely. But before we get into the events of the now, let's back it up a little bit and just help our audience understand, how did you even get into freight?
I like everybody else, freight found me.
Yeah.
It's I came back from New York. I was working in financial media and financial publications, and came back to Oklahoma during the Great Recession. Got an MBA. Had a hard time finding a job after that, and I became a freight broker. So I was a freight broker for a couple of years back in 2012, 2013, and a couple more years, and had tough time finding capacity. So I started making calls and started a company called Carrierlets that was around from 2016 to 2022. I sold that to Jordan Graft over at Highway. And now he's just added a bunch of other really cool stuff on it and attacking double brokers and fraud in the industry. And he kind of used that as his first step into the business. And I mean, that's an amazing product that he has over there. Started at FreightWaves in 2019, director of research, went on to run day-to-day operations of the entire media operations for a couple of years. But now I'm back as an entrepreneur and an outside contributor doing Put That Coffee Down each week.
Oh, I love that. So let's camp out there for a little bit. So anybody's watch your podcast, it's great content for sales professionals of all industries, quite honestly. But tell us the story. How did that come together? What was the inspiration?
Actually, it's one of the coolest stories and I love telling it because Dooner came by my desk right before the pandemic and everyone left. We had a full office. He came on my desk and he had some free time because I think he had a port report right before the ports heated up that they're going to stop that podcast, and he wanted to do one on freight brokerage. And we sat there and talked for a few minutes. And all of a sudden, we came up with the sales podcast because, freight brokerage is all about sales and marketing. So we had that. Then we had the theme song. We had this artwork behind me, all done by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We had a title. We put it all together in less than a day. Got it out in social media, and within a week, we taped. Actually, we did it live. We did live our first episode back in February of 2020. So it's a great lesson for sales and for entrepreneurship or starting anything is don't think about too much. Just go pick out some names, pick out some artwork, pick out something and go run with it. Just do it and learn as you go.
So for those on the Tenney Group marketing team watching this, Kevin has just informed me that all this can be done in an afternoon. So now we have a new standard. So I appreciate that, sir. But obviously great work. Something that stood out to me recently in an episode, you and Omar Singh talking about how this is a great market to build a business and to build value. What did you all mean? Help us kind of unpack that a little bit. Why is this an opportunistic period of time?
It is. Down markets are a great time to start a business, right? Sometimes you're laid off. Sometimes, unforeseen circumstances. Sometimes you've already started your business, but now it's time to accelerate it. And,
Mm,
during a hard market, we're just trying to keep up with the market. We're just trying to service, but to lay that foundation. And if you read about the great companies that were formed during the Great Depression or the Great
mhm,
Recession, it's eye opening. But now is the time to get in front of customers as everyone else is drawing back, kind of. They're cutting their marketing budgets. They're cutting their office visits. Their trips. They're just cutting back and taking this mentality of just no one's buying right now. No one's buying right now.
mhm,
Well, that's great. No one's buying right now. But get in front of as many people as you can. Formulate your foundation. Get out there and meet and greet, and you're going to get a lot of no's. And no
mhm,
one might be buying right now. But when the market turns, when it gets hot again, when buying conditions ease and get better, you've put yourself in a position to take advantage of that. Because if you don't start until the market's hot, you're playing catch
mhm,
up, right? You're trying to establish yourself, your credibility, everything
mhm,
else as this hot market that's throwing off cash is passing you by as you're doing the foundational work you should have been doing in the slow times.
mhm. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that there's kind of a couple different mindsets that struggle with that as far as like I got to sell something now. Uh,
Yes.
um, and so what is it about the folks that are winning right now because they are setting themselves up for the future? What is it about their personality, their mindset, their grittiness that allows them to be a little bit more long game mentality than the folks that are just trying to survive during that same period?
I think if you're focused on the long game, you're going to focus on sustainable solutions and
Mm,
services and packages and pricing. And one of my favorite guests on Put That Coffee Down, and he's not from Freight at all, which is great. But David Hoffeld, who's really deep into the science of selling, he's got a couple books out there, Sell More with Science and the Science of Selling. And we always talk about the growth mindset, right?
mhm,
The growth mindset, means that you're not fixed today and you are focused on the long term and you're building that foundation to capture the long term. So we're not worried about sales today. We're working
mhm,
about creating something, a sales pipeline, a product that is going to capture people's attention and captures the money in a year or 2 years and 5 years and 10 years. And it's going to keep growing and growing and growing. I think a lot of times organizations are too focused on what's build this month, right? Or build this
mhm.
quarterly numbers, monthly numbers, and it's hard. It's really hard to attack both a short game and a long game. I guess
Right.
this might be a golf analogy now. Short game and a long game, they're two different approaches. And if
Mhm.
you get the long game right, every short month, quarter, you're not going to worry about it because you know it's there. But if you're focused on every month, every quarter, you're going to be worried about next quarter and the quarter after. And you're playing catch up and it's very reactive instead of proactive.
No, I think that's really great. And you touched on the growth mindset. I mean, growth is a core value at Tenney Group. And what's interesting is when knowing how the M&A market and how deals get done is constantly evolving. We know as a profile, having a growth mindset's a key ingredient to knowing if somebody's going to be a fit. So I'm always asking them and our team in the recruiting process, we're trying to, what are you doing, like independent of your profession, to develop yourself? And I think that's a great insight in terms of, is somebody going to have what it takes to think long game, um, and, and,
Yeah,
and, and have those capabilities.
and that's perfect because I mean, it's
Mm,
growth. And if you have that growth mindset, individual failures, lost sales or lost business, that doesn't really affect you too much because you have your eyes on the long term. And failure, you don't worry about that month. That month doesn't matter because I'm building this for a year from now, and this is my goal. And in the M&A market, it's more important than ever because
yeah,
you don't you don't sell a company in a month. You don't have a great month and now it's time to sell the company. You have to have
right.
a sustained long-term growth path of consistent execution And you don't do that by chasing each month's number.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that M&A, where our worlds are now intersecting a little bit. You've got a new venture that you have going with HK Analytica. So you began to tease it at the beginning of our episode, and I did as well, talking about how there's always a story behind the numbers. So tell us about what is the problem that you're trying to solve for with this business venture, and what else can you tell us about it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. And when I was in New York, I worked for a great company called Blue Heron. They did a lot of qualitative. They were investigative journalists formerly, and
Hmm.
during the Great Recession, they all got laid off, and they formed this company, and they work with value investors mostly, and they do qualitative due diligence for them. And what I mean by that is, like, if you have a great value investor who wants to put money in publicly or privately, or take the business over, or a private equity group that's looking, they want to dig deep behind the numbers. They want to know about the management team. They want to know about the corporate culture. They want to know how decisions are made. Now, you can do that in the M&A world, and it works perfectly. But working in the enterprise account field, right? Whenever you're trying to sell to enterprise, it is a maze of
Hmm.
closed doors, trap doors. You have to figure out the chessboard, right? You have to see the chessboard and play it. And if you're usually one step behind. There's
Hmm.
usually one decision maker out there that you've never heard their name. You certainly never met them or talked to them, but they're very influential. You have to figure out what a company cares about, and they're going to tell you, and it's going to be a little bit guarded because you're a salesperson. It's just natural. But
Hmm.
if you go in and you talk to former employees, right? If you talk to people in the know, and you kind of get the landscape and that chessboard and what's out there awaiting for you, you can tailor your message, you can tailor your approach, and you can be much more successful. Because we all kind of want, and I hate to use the word inside information, because in the financial circle, that's a big no-no.
Right.
But you want behind the curtains, kind of who's pulling the levers, and you kind of want to know that before you walk into any situation. And it's just your normal intel that is valuable, and how valuable it is, I'm trying to find out right now.
Oh, I like that. So, so what are the age of the company? It's relatively new.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about what's going to be happening in the coming months with the business?
Well, it's coming out. It's coming out with eventually a library of company profiles, what I call shipper profiles right now. Always subject to change.
Hmm.
But some custom research as well that we're doing, focus on that kind of lower enterprise market, where salespeople, maybe you're getting some business from them, but not all of it, and you can't really crack that code. Or
Hmm.
you really want this business, you really want to get in on it, but you can't really find the right person to talk to. You can't find the decision makers. Somehow it's stalled. It always gets stalled. Providing better intelligence on that, to where maybe you can change your approach, you can change, certainly your messaging, and you can tailor your message more to what that company values, because sometimes you just don't really know until you start talking to people that have uh, been in on those meetings, or what have you. And that's really what we're coming out with right now.
No, I love the idea of just kind of like boiling it down to what do they care about and how do they like to communicate. I mean, that could
Hmm.
change everything.
Yeah.
Just understanding that in advance of an outreach. I'm excited to see what's coming for you and your team. That's great. So let me transition over in terms of the current freight market. Just what are the issues? What are the things that you're seeing out there that are we talked about, some opportunities as a sales side, but what are some of the issues that maybe you see are some challenges that you think are pretty pressing right now?
I think some of the challenges on the freight side is just the market in general, and drivers for any turn in that market. And it's kind of what we saw in 2019, right? We didn't see any drivers for this overcapacity to really affiliate, really alleviate. That's the word, alleviate itself anytime soon. And we don't see that now. But of course, we had the pandemic, which no one could foresee in 2020, that turned the market. So I think that the drivers of the market, you have interest rates going up, you have, I think, more layoffs, more outside of technology, sweeping the land. You have more bankruptcies as well in trucking and trucking going out of business, which I guess that alleviates some of that supply and demand imbalance. But I think that's one of the things on the market side. When you're talking about pricing or supply and demand, I just don't see the drivers that are going to increase the strength of the spot market, or keep contract rates the way they are right now. I think they have to come down to meet the spot market, and I think
Hmm.
we're seeing tender volume rejections sub 3%, around 3%. It's hard to kick anything into gear when that's happening.
Hmm. So, so what would be your advice to CEOs across America who are trying to navigate a difficult period? I mean, from your vantage point, I think there's some perspective there. What would be a couple pieces of advice in your experience in this space? What would you be doing to help them be a more sustainable operation in the coming months?
Well, I think efficiencies, right? Automation. There's a lot of great tech out there. I think it's a great time to buy tech because I think that the pricing's come down a little
Good
bit.
point.
It has, right? The need hasn't disappeared whatsoever. And take those
Hmm.
lessons you learned over the last 2 years, because we've all learned a lot of lessons about how inefficient we were, how we could have done things better, and employ that technology. And there's so many good things off the shelf right now. That or you can do on an annual basis, monthly basis. There's no huge development costs involved in it, and just make even low hanging fruit, minor changes on the cost side. And I guess I go back to what we were talking about a while ago on the sales side: is go
Hmm.
out and collect as many not yets as possible, and don't get discouraged, because as long as you keep in front of people who will talk to you, but they just don't have a need yet, when the
Hmm.
market turns, they're going to have a need again, and you're going to be in the prime position to take advantage of that. Build that grows your customer base right there,
Yeah.
and that's how you grow over the years is by capturing that hot market. So those are the two things that I would my two pieces of advice right
I
there.
love how simple that is. I mean, think about it, just stack up your not yets,
Yeah,
and then that's a pretty basic formula for winning. Um, so,
yeah.
a couple more questions. One, a little bit of a wild card, but before I get to there, let's talk about M&A. What's your take? I mean, there's been a couple splashes here or there in the last several weeks. What's your take on the current M&A market?
I think it's pretty good. I think we're seeing a lot of consolidation. I think there's going to be more activity. You talk about John Market, it means that the M&A is going to be down, but I don't think so. I think it's again these lessons learned over the last couple of years. You're going to do a little bit more consolidation. I think there's for the buyers, the valuations come down to earth. For the sellers, it's just like, do I want to go through another down market, and or am I ever going to see another valuation, another up market like we saw during the pandemic? I
Right.
don't know. Maybe it's time to get out. And there's a lot of going back to efficiencies and things like that. And books of business, there's a lot of incentives right now to do deals. So I think it's going to be a pretty healthy market, and I'm sure you think that as well. I hope you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think despite all of the the noise, there's still tremendous engagement, and for much of the reasons that you just listed out there. But I think that just the new reality is the costs. I mean, they're not going away, so there's going to
Yeah.
have to continue to be creative ways to offset that, and at least for now, acquisitions clearly one of the most straightforward paths to address that. So yeah,
It
so
is. So
so
there's a lot of operators out there who are really good at scaling and absorbing assets into their network and their books of business, and they're going to go on a spree. Now, it might not be major deals, but it is going to be very strategic and high volume, I think.
agreed. Agreed. So, all right. So, one last question for you, Kevin. Just like I said, a little bit of a wild card here. So, when you're trying to pump yourself up, you're like, "Hey, I got to go close some business." And what movie, what scene involving a sales organization are you referencing to go use as your hype video to go close new business?
Well, it's all in the name right there, right? I guess right there. Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only. And that's
That's right.
we took the first part of that title, and the whole movie. It's one of my favorite sales movies. But the scene with Alec Baldwin is just amazing. Jack Lemmon in there, it kind of pumps me up, and so I really like that, and the Wolf of Wall Street is pretty good. But when I need to go close the deals, I focus on prospecting. Right, if I have to close a deal, I want to have 15 or 20 on the table because I know I can get one.
Yep.
Even if I can't close anything, I get one out of 20. So I go out and prospect and prospect and prospect. So um, I do that, and the Goodfellas too. I think that's a good hustling movie, right? It's kind of criminal, um, but I always liked Henry Hill's line. Every day I
Yeah.
was learning how to make a buck here and a buck there. So if you're always trying to look for a buck here and a buck there, something's going to pan out.
Well, I love just the simplicity of how you approach the business, and just all that the insight and value that you bring to our industry through your podcast and through the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for being in the hot seat, Kevin. We'll see you next time.